Gentlemen, let me begin with that situation that we see 12 counties have been listed as food insecure. We're talking about a population of nearly 900,000 Kenyans in these parts. The Cabinet Secretary says that we don't have a deficiency in food supply in the country. What do you think is happening in these regions that we find ourselves, that we have people who are very starved and very weak because they don't have food?
Thank you, Sam, and good morning to you and to the viewers. The situation in Kenya is just one of incompetence, because we've got excess maize in the cereal zones, the Nzoia, the Uasin Gishu, the Elgeyo Marakwet, and yet we don't have enough food in Turkana. You can blame everything. You can blame the weather. You can blame locusts. You can blame ticks. I listened to the CS devolution yesterday saying that it's as if a plague similar to the plague that visited the Egyptians before the Israelis left has visited Turkana. Those are excuses for incompetence. What we can't figure out in this country is a proper supply chain or logistical solutions that can make sure that when you have a surplus in one corner of the country where there is a deficiency, there can be some movement. We didn't know that this was coming because the meteorological department had forecast, even at the last harvest, that the rains were not going to be sufficient to produce enough food that would take these people into the next 1 year. The National Drought Management Authority, which is a statutory body, had already predicted and had already given out warning signs that there was going to be a problem. What then do we do? When we start hearing news that people are dying because of hunger, then the CS flies in with a few thousand bags of maize just to provide assurances, and also tells them that they are going to build a dam. You know, at a time when other dams are being built and there are serious questions around the propriety of those kind of projects. Right. So I think we need to style up. Every year we have this kind of situations. You have a glut in one side, people throwing away potatoes, people pouring milk, people stuck with their maize, and you've got a shortage in the other. This was part of the reason why we say that with devolution, probably people like the residents of Turkana, the residents of Samburu and Marsabit would be taken care of in a much more prudent manner. And for me, ultimately the solution, if we can't agree on setting up an executive that has basic competencies, then we need to strengthen counties and give them more functions so that they are able to respond much faster. There is no reason why CS Wamalwa should fly into Turkana. The solution should start with Governor Nanok, and we must empower him, we must give him the resources, we must give him the structures to feed his people. And
let me just ask a question about what he just said, that the counties need to be empowered to be in a position to respond to such situations. I would imagine that on the basic of it, because food security is also a responsibility of the counties. So why is it so hard for a county like Turkana, which received an allocation of about 12 billion shillings every year, why is it so hard for them to plan for situations like what they face with 192,000 already facing starvation?
Good morning, viewers. What I want to say, as my colleague has said, agriculture is fully devolved. We did harvest 46 million bags of maize last year. When you go to Eldoret now, the trucks are still queuing for almost 3 to 4 months. It is quite ironical, and I want to agree the solution is not flying to Turkana. I think the problem is that even some of the recommendations when the Senate adopted the maize report, one of them was to devolve fully the management and running of strategic food reserve and also the National Cereals and Produce Board, which has not been done up to date. So how do you expect Governor Nanok and other counties to assist? The backstop to the Ministry of Devolution, where surveillance on this, they knew that drought would be there, meteorological department had predicted, the maize is there, the trucks are queuing. Government has, in the strategic food reserve, it has 3 million bags of maize. We would have expected them to release that maize, which is in strategic food reserve, to assist areas that are affected by hunger. And then they would have bought the maize. But when we asked, we were being told which contract or business do you have with government that they must buy maize from you? And it is so sad, I recall, that most Kenyans are now suffering from hunger.
But how far can the county government go in ensuring that its people are food secure?
Of course, in terms of food security, and in terms of agriculture is fully devolved. The function of policy, and therefore, I think the failure by the counties is that in their budgets, and the PSC chair is here, is that they provide for an item of issues of emergency, and therefore they should have used the emergency fund to ensure that they purchase some of these foodstuffs that they need. And therefore, even if for example, the NCPB and Strategic Food Reserve has not been fully devolved. They should have gone into partnership between the NCPB, SFR, and the county governments, because they have money in the emergency fund, which is provided for under their budget estimates within the counties.
All right, so of course, joining us on the table, as we also promised earlier, Ledama Olekina, Narok Senator, is here. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Let's pick up the conversation from there, Honorable Dan Manzo. It's 2019, and here we are discussing food starvation for Kenya, a country that lies along the equatorial region. A warning was given to us as early as December last year. Like we've also said, one side of the country has plenty, the other side is starving. Moses Kajwang talked about empowering the governor of Turkana, that's Josephat. But what empowering does he need? He already has a title. He's the governor. He has a budget allocation. What more does he need to do to make sure that his county, people within that region, are not starving?
Yes, first and foremost, most probably, you may find his monies has not yet gotten to his county. There has been delays of monies for counties, and governors have actually gone through a very difficult time. So Treasury, we have to counter check with the Treasury whether his monies are there in good time, whether he's got emergency. But more important, if you look at it globally, many people in the world are starving, and in fact, every second you have one or two people in the world dying of hunger, and that's why there is World Food Program to monitor this. So if you look at it, we have a government in place, we have a minister in charge of devolution, we have a governor, we have a member of parliament who even has an emergency of CDF, and we have NGOs, we have Red Cross, we have World Food Program. This should not be happening in Kenya.
Okay.
And we really want to thank the journalists for exposing this in good time so that serious action can be taken at all levels of governance.
All right.
Yes.
I mean, Senator Ledama, drought is not something that you wake up to overnight. It's something that has been there. We were warned earlier. This is a clear display of neglect and irresponsibility from state agencies to individuals who are in charge of leadership in this country.
I think the biggest problem we have, which Senator Kajwang alluded to, has got to do with the issue of devolution. If we are for devolution, let us be for devolution. There is always a principle that says forms follows functions. In this case, resources ought to follow functions. If you look at Turkana, for instance, Turkana South is somewhere where a year ago, every farmer was now leaving the traditional cattle raising, like keeping cattle, to now farming. So I think what Governor Nanok ought to do, he has to be able to realign his existing resources. He's got to be able to take stock of his entire county from the north to the south and see what challenges we have, or he has in Turkana, to ensure that the people of Turkana North who are suffering from this heavy drought can be able to benefit. He also needs to go to Turkana. You know, the biggest problem we have with these governors, and I think some of these problems are brought about by either the control of budget or treasury, whereby most of them have to stay in Nairobi to be able to ensure that their money is sent to the counties. So we've got to fix either our laws to ensure that all resources that are devolved are actually sent in time. My colleague here stated very clearly that in most cases, I sit in park and governors come and say, we have to send our officers to Nairobi to be able to pursue the control of budget, to get approval for us to be able to get the exchequer release. So we've got to be able to, we cannot only attack the county governments as saying that they are not doing what they ought to be doing, yet there are people who do not support devolution, who are still saying, we keep these resources here, we keep these resources here. It makes it very, very difficult.
So it's politics that delays funding?
I think it is not politics that delays funding. I think it is a control of treasury. that controls funding. We have a lot of maize in Kitale right now, like my colleague has said. I know a farmer in Kitale who's got over 50,000 bags. He cannot be able to sell. So it's really ridiculous that people should be starving in this country, yet other part of this country, we have a lot of crops.
We have plenty. And I want us to take a look at what the Cabinet Secretary had to say. But before you do that, you can text us your views on 22422. You can tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya, at Samgituku, at Zinzi_K, or you can call us on 0719 777 0742961343. But first, let's listen to what the Cabinet Secretary had to say when he toured Baringo County yesterday.
Aligawa korogoro mbili. Hii chakula haikutosha watu. Watu wengine walipata na kuna wale wajapata. Tukatulia kukula mikoma.
Umeomba magunia 5,000 ya chakula ifikie sehemu hii yetu. Na naomba chiefs ikifika isambaze kabisa kwa wananchi kamili. Mimi na support maneno ambayo Mheshimiwa Kamketa amesema na MCA kwamba ikifika ipelekwe direct kwa wananchi.
We have an emergency fund of over 5 billion that we will be utilizing to ensure that we deal with the issue of food, and that will be my ministry special programs. We'll be dealing with the issue of water. CS Chelugui will be allocated funds to ensure that enhanced water tracking is done, repairing of boreholes, and quick relief that can be brought.
So you hear clearly the Cabinet Secretary talking about they're going to set aside resources to repair boreholes, to do water tracking. We have enough food. All the agencies will be coming on board. We hear Governor Kiptis, Governor of Baringo, Stanley Kiptis, saying that their fear is that this food may not reach the mwananchi who needs it. Then you have a resident saying that tulipewa gorogoro mbili haitoshi. How do you ensure that the dignity of these human beings is preserved even during such times?
First of all, we have to move away from this issue of knee-jerk reactions. We have to really be able to look at our, look at our stocks, look at the people who we are actually supposed to be representing, and ensuring that every single time we know their needs, we know their challenges that they face. When the CS goes there and says we're going to set up resources, this becomes also all those projects, which I said we are projects, but really they don't translate to people benefiting. So I think what ought to be done is that the governor of that county, of Baringo, ought to do an audit to find out what is going on in his county. The CS also has got to, there's a lot of money being left in Maji House. Why should that now be set aside? Why should they not continuously use that money? MPs are allocated money in most cases to be able to ensure that there's a water pan here, or there's a borehole here, or there's a, there's a well somewhere. So really, we've got to move away from this issue of afterthoughts. When something hit us so hard is when we now come and say we will set aside resources. We really have got to look at our people, realign our existing resources, and ensure that we support the well-being of our people.
Right.
So, Dan Manzo, is it a possibility in this country that we can plan ahead of time? What is that we need to do?
First, I want to say, and we must admit, there is failure in these circumstances. For one to starve to death, it takes many days. So it means for a long time, something has been going wrong, and the leadership which is on ground, from the chief to the county commissioner, because now there is a government coordination, to the member of parliament there, to the MCA, it means all this leadership is not in touch with the people. It means something is totally wrong, and we need to plan quite early. You can see these people are malnourished. First of all, they need proper nutrition to be able to recover. Otherwise, you're going to have more deaths. Because when someone is starving and then disease strikes, you have a lot of people die. And we have enough resources. It's just a matter of coordination. We need to wake up and make sure this does not happen again in our country. So I must admit, on terms of the elected leaders, in terms of the national government, in terms of the grassroots government, there is a problem. We have to do something about it. And this is also what comes up with the water. You remember now the stalled dams, and there are rivers everywhere in Kenya. We have a lot of water flowing in these lands throughout. This is not even more desert than Israel. Okay. So there's no excuse really not to have food at all on ground. We must really take care of what we have. We have enough service water. We have enough groundwater in the same region. So as a government, we are challenged, and we must take up the challenge.
Let's take a look at some of the SMSs that are sending us to on 22422. If you can have that so that you read what you are saying as you watch. Comment from Eldoret is saying that it is sad and unforgivable that the TRT Member of Parliament, Honorable Kamket, is now waking up to the reality that his constituents are dying due to the drought. The MP has in the recent past been vocal on 2022 succession politics, fronting Senator Moi as his favorite. The two should be camping in TRT, distributing food and saving lives. One life lost is one too many.
All right, let's take a look at another one. Okay, you don't say who you are, but the lorries with maize should relocate and line up from Eldoret and Kitale to Lodwar. The Turkana residents have the money to buy food, which is now not available.
Do they have the money, Senator Kajwang?
Well, they ought to have their disbursements. We are getting close to the financial year, so I believe that they've had their disbursements for the last 3 quarters. But this matter should not be blamed on the county. And I think we need to be fair, because the 4th schedule of the Constitution puts disaster management as a distinct function of the national government. And that's why I was talking about finding ways of rejigging this. Disaster management is a function of the national government. The CS yesterday talked of counties having emergency funds. There are 2 things about these emergency funds. Number one, they are limited to not more than 2% of the previous budget. And 2, there is a manner in which they can be applied. In fact, the definition of the circumstances under which you can use a county emergency fund includes unforeseen events. The question is, was this unforeseen? There were warning signs, not just signs, but there were reports that warned us that we are going to get into this kind of situation. So the entity, the governance entity that has money to deal with this solution right now is the national government. And it would be very lazy for them to tell the county to use a county emergency fund. In my county of Homa Bay, you'll find the county emergency fund being used to, so if there's a boat that capsizes in the lake, or people who are killed by hippos or crocodiles, those are the cases that the emergency fund sets in to resolve. It is for emergencies. This situation in Turkana is not an emergency. We saw it coming, and the national government must take responsibility and must not pass this to county governments. And if they want county governments to respond, then we must have that candid conversation that disaster management then becomes a shared responsibility, because it can't be for the county exclusively, and then let them give counties money specifically for that purpose.